It's Wednesday. You know what that means. Time for the Southern California Writers Association Hump Day Book Tour. I'm your host, Maddie Margarita, here with Diana Pardee on tech. Every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m., the Southern California Writers Association turns our Facebook page over to a new writer to talk about their books and their work. This morning, we're pleased to have with us Dennis Crosby. Dennis is the award-winning author of the Amazon bestselling urban fantasy novel, Death's Legacy, released in November 2020, and its follow-up, Death's Debt. See, I said it that time. Death's Debt. Released November 2021. The bourbon-loving Chicago Cubs fan, Cubby, I didn't read that before. And Deep Dish Pizza Connoisseur is continuing his work on his Cassidy Simmons series and writing weird and creepy short stories in his spare time. A self-proclaimed geek and lover of pop culture, Dennis lives and writes in San Diego, California. Welcome again, Dennis.
Thank you for having me, Matt. It's good to be here.
Well, I love your bio, and we're going to have to talk offline about the Cubs, but because I am from New York, so we have our own loyalties.
I have some love for some New York teams too. You've got the Yankees have one of my favorite former Cubs there, so I always keep an eye out for them.
Okay, I'm glad you went Yankees and not Mets. That's all I'm saying. Good man. All right, so you're an urban fantasy writer. So what is it about urban fantasy that intrigues you and the storylines that you find there?
For me, as a kid, I grew up watching like all the Star Trek shows, and like I lived in Northern California as a kid before I moved to Chicago, and got like 3 channels, and one of them had all the reruns of Star Trek, and I watched like all of those. And then sometime in the early 80s, I got really involved in Greek mythology. And through that, I'm reading comic books. And so fantasy was like where it's at, like magic and sorcery and sword play and dragons, like all these fantastic things that just create this wondrous world in the imagination. I think I've just lived there, since I was 8, 9 years old. And as I got older, once I started learning how to actually tell a story, it just I naturally gravitated toward that. I needed to have something that had that mythology in it. I needed to be able to create a world where virtually anything was possible. But I also like doing those things and rooting them in the real world, so that people can kind of be out there and, like I was as 8, 9-year-old kid, just wonder, what if I open that door? Is that going to be another portal to another world? So being able to create that, I think, is just a lot of fun for me, and takes me back, kind of keeps me rooted in that childhood, so I don't get too serious with the rest of the world.
Well, it's funny that you talk about that, because a lot of the comments and reviews about your books talk a lot about your world building and the depth of your world building. So when you're writing a good quality urban fantasy, a character is important, like it is in any book, but so is the world building.
Yeah.
So how do you balance the character and the plot and the world building when you're writing this, so everything feels the way that it should when it's being read?
For me, with the characters, I want to make sure that they feel like real people. I don't want them to be caricatures. And so, like my academic and professional background, I've always paid attention to people, behaviors, things they say, things they do. I want folks to be able to relate to them. And if I'm able to do that correctly, readers will focus on that. And so the rest of the world building just kind of falls into place. It seems natural because it's going to feel more natural for those characters. The readers are going to buy into the character then buys into the world they live in. And I think it becomes a natural kind of symbiotic relationship for everyone that's involved in that. And there's times sometimes when I'll just kind of, I don't want to get too wild. I want to kind of root it in some sort of reality. I don't want to go too far off the reservation, but I think you have to in some instances, but still be able to kind of pull it back and keep it not realistic, but at least plausible.
Right. Well, Cassidy Simmons is an interesting character. She has a high emotional IQ, I think is a good way to describe her. She's strong sense of empathy. Sometimes gets overwhelmed by her. I guess it says, or it's been said that people's strength is also their greatest weakness.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about her and what readers can expect when you read about her adventures.
When I first created her, my goal was to create someone who, like me, is empathetic. I know a lot of people that are empathetic. People talk about being empathetic or being an empath. And I got to thinking, like, what would happen if those empathic powers just got out of control? Like, how would I react? I know how I can sometimes get overwhelmed in social situations because it's like sensory overload. So what if a true empath, what would happen to them if they're able to feel every emotion in the room, but like magnified? And so that was kind of the initial impetus for creating her. And then, as much as you said, as much as that is a strength, it can also be a weakness, because when she's trying to fight the bad guy, she can often sense the emotions of others around her. And that can be very debilitating. It can be distracting. It can cause her great pain at times. I have a scene in the first book where she's walking past a hospital. And these are places that she tries to stay away from because of the amount of emotion that's kind of surrounding that hospital area. And she can't even go in the door because she can feel that pain immediately. Just hits her in the stomach, makes her drop to her knees. And I thought that would be an interesting way to, add that weakness to the character. That is her kryptonite. Those are the moments when she just can't deal. And as people do sometimes in the real world, she has some very negative coping mechanisms for dealing with that. She's an addict. In the first, she drinks bourbon. She was pairing her bourbon with Vicodin as well to try to numb the pain. And so I wanted to, kind of get into that a little bit and show, yeah, she's got these fantastic powers, but at her core, she's very, very much human, just like everybody else.
That has that, I think of Jessica Jones when you say that.
Yes.
Right.
I often describe the book as, Jessica Jones meets Clash of the Titans.
Yeah, I love that. Anyway, so you have such a wonderful protagonist. She deserves a wonderful antagonist. So how did you come up with her antagonist, or her obstacle, her challenge?
I think creating antagonists is sometimes it's the most fun because the key there is giving that individual something that is tangible, something that people can also relate to. You don't want to have a villain just for the sake of having a villain. You want them to actually have a motivation. And, for her antagonist, his motivation at its core is love. But everything else he does, is he's so blinded by what he's actually, what harm he's causing other people because of this drive, that he does the wrong things to the wrong people, essentially. And so I needed someone that had, in equal footing with her, similar drive. She's driven by love and compassion in many ways. But he is he's so focused on it that nothing else matters. And so having them kind of going toward the same goal with similar but different motivations, I think, was key. And putting them against each other in a way that, they knew that one of them had to die in order for the world, to survive, or the world that they wanted to survive to go on.
So complex. And I know you write other things other than your novel series. So would it be fair to say you're a prolific short story writer? Or
I don't know about prolific. When I tried to write short stories, actually, my first book, Death's Legacy, was supposed to be a short story, and I couldn't do it because I tend to be a little verbose when I'm writing. The short story piece, I don't think it really came into play for me until maybe the last year. And I finally really learned to hone in on like just one instance and one scene. And so last year I had 2 short stories come out, both in horror realms. The first was a horror story based on Sanford and Son.
I'm sorry that I try not to laugh. It's impossible not to laugh.
It is impossible.
Right.
So I had Fred and Lamont. They were actually they ran the junkyard, but the junkyard was actually a jail for demons. And so they are, they're supposed to be the wardens of this place. I thought it was a great idea, and it was a lot of fun to write. This year I have 2 short stories out currently, and I have 2 more coming out toward the end of the year. And so, yeah, I like writing like fun, weird, crazy stories. They don't always have to be horror. They just kind of tend to fall in that realm. And again, it's because of that love I have of that fantasy, that supernatural, that, you know, it's the what if factor. You know, what if this is real? What if this were to actually happen? How would people then react to that? You know, when I say I write horror, I don't necessarily write about the monsters that are out there. I write about the people and how they are dealing with those monsters and those dark forces, because I think that's the most compelling part of horror, you know, is how are the people actually going to get out of that situation?
And I think that's the part that people relate to. Because
Yeah,
everybody has monsters in their life that they have to
exactly.
So I know your most recent story published.
Yes, blood fiction.
This new anthology, Blood Fiction, a collection of fantastic writers.
I started reading that I had it for a while, and I was finally able to get into it over the weekend. I mean, there are some outstanding stories in there. I love writers. I mean, the imagination that we have, that, you know, and the fact that we're able to kind of put that on paper and transport people to that world, I think it's one of the greatest arts out there. And those stories in that book, in that anthology, it makes you think. I think some of them sparked other stories for me.
You know, it's funny. I kind of think anthologies are great for people who have ADD, you know, novel readers with ADD, because you get to jump from one type to another.
Exactly.
And you can sit down and read them for a few minutes and get up and walk away and not feel like you have to start to read over again. You get that whole bite.
Exactly.
Rather than the nibbles as you're reading a novel.
Precisely.
So, yeah, that's so great. So what is it that you hope that readers feel when they read a novel that you've written, like a Death's Legacy and Death's Debt?
I hope that they are able, you know, the world's complex. There's all kinds of issues out there. You know, if anyone out there is like me, I hate watching the news. I don't necessarily read the newspaper. You know, if it's big enough news, I'm going to hear about it. The small stuff, I'll find out about it from someone. But every news report seems to be depressing, you know, and it takes people down this hole. And I want people to be able to look into my books and get away from that, you know, for 300 pages. Just go into a different world, you know, delve into the world of reapers and wraiths and gods, and see how people are navigating that. Take yourself out of this world, put yourself in this one, and just let go for a little while. There are characters that you're going to connect with because they are very real. They're very human, even though they have these fantastic powers and abilities. And you can connect with them and kind of travel with them and think about what you would do in those situations, knowing that you're in a safe space and nothing's, you know, going to happen to you. But it's connection, you know, that's what I want people to get out of it, and realize that you can get away from the world. You're not alone. A lot of people want to do that. And you know, for a few hours, just kind of zone out and enjoy the ride.
So I think that's so great. I think that's why most people read.
Yeah.
To get away from the mundane and the everyday, and listen to somebody else's problems for a change.
Exactly.
Which, you know, tend to be a lot, because if we do our job, tend to be worse than the problems that they're facing every day. All right. So Dennis, where can people find your books and your short stories? And
best way to find me is at my website. It is DennisKCrosby.com. There's a link. I have a tab for my books, so you can pick up my novels, Death's Legacy, Death's Debt, and all of the anthologies that I am currently in and will be in are posted with purchase links as well.
Okay, so before we say goodbye, I don't usually do this, but since I was a Trekkie, your favorite original Star Trek episode, the one that comes to mind first?
I mean, everyone goes with the Tribbles, and that one is kind of the one that pops out.
That's what I was thinking, that one, or the one where Spock loses his logic and goes all haywire.
The one where, and also I think that was not that episode. There was one episode where we find out that Spock was married and he's got to go back to Vulcan, and he and Kirk
That's it.
fight.
Yes,
That's the
that
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, I thought it was great to see him in a different light as well.
Yeah. Oh, God. Anyway, all right. Well, it was fun talking to you. We wish you a lot of luck on your books. Do you have
Thank
something
you.
coming out?
Well, Blood Fiction just came out, so
Right.
pick that one up and read those 17 stories. I mean, I'm telling you, guys are gonna have a great time. And this October, I'm in an anthology called Literally Dead. It is an anthology of horror stories that all take place around Halloween.
Oh, perfect. And that will be on your website too when it comes out,
That
right?
will, yep, it's available for pre-order, so you can go to my website and actually purchase it now so that it's in your hot little hands on release day.
All right. All right. That sounds good. Thank you for being here. Thank you everyone else for being here. Until next time, I'm Maddie Margarita, and this has been the Southern California Writers Association Hump Day Book Tour.